What's the stand a chance of winning?
You strike when your enemy is weak.
I'm a fair man. It's a fair offer. Do we have a deal?
The fascinating story of Peaky Blinders, with its thrilling and violent take on the life of Birmingham gang leader Thomas Shelby, has attracted much attention around the world. One of the first questions that the audience and fans of Peaky Blinders are likely to face is whether or not its story is true. Everyone wants to know if Tommy Shelby is an extraterrestrial or not. Did the Peaky Blinders really hide disposable blades in the brim of their hats? How much do you know about the facts of this drama? Gangster drama Peaky Blinders tells the tale of Thomas Shelby and his criminal gang. Peaky Blinders, as they were known, has become an infamous name, although the exact origins of it remain a mystery. Some believe it to have originated from the barbaric practice of stitching razor blades into the peak of their caps, although this might be a more fantastical theory, as others suggest the luxury item of a disposable razor blade would not have been commonplace at the time. Another theory is that Peaky Blinders derives from the use of the cap to disguise their faces from the victims so they could not be identified. The infamy of the group and its distinctive name may simply have come from local slang at the time, using blinder as a description for someone looking particularly striking in appearance. Wherever the name came from, it stuck and would become a namesake for gangs long after the Peaky Blinders' demise. The origins of this gang and others similar to it came from the poor living conditions and economic hardships which dominated industrial England during the late 19th and early 20th century. Poverty was a principal cause for the formation of gangs, which began with young boys who took up pickpocketing as a way of earning money. Stephen Knight is the writer and creator of the hit TV series Peaky Blinders. He said that he created and wrote the series based on the words and stories of his father. His father's oral history, which he remembered about Peaky Blinders and their survivors, and described them to Knight, men who had perfect clothes on, hats of the same shape, and guns in their pockets. Knight's father, who was around 8 to 9 years old at that time, was ordered to send letters to his uncles. When he reached his uncle's house, he saw about 8 men who were well-dressed, wearing hats, and had weapons in their pockets. Not only that, the entire table was also covered with money. They were ruthless and used hats with sewed-in razor blades to control the streets of Birmingham. The gang used several different methods of extortion, robbery, smuggling, murder, fraud, and assault to get what they wanted, and had no issues with how far they would go. They terrorized their home streets from the 1880s to the 1910s. From his father's story, Knight was inspired to write stories about gangster men in Birmingham. He started doing research about the Peaky Blinders gang and what was really going on. Knight began to read extensively about the gangs and combined stories from his father and from books. It is important to note that although Peaky Blinders was a real street gang, the author created the entire Shelby family from his own imagination and made them the main basis of the story. You should note that the criminal gangs of Birmingham, due to their power, have left little historical records because often the violence in the poor neighborhoods of the cities was not recorded in the books, and only occasional reports of big and important things were recorded. As a result, much of the surviving historical documentation is unreliable and can only be speculated upon. Different from the series, the Peaky Blinders gang started in the 1980s. The real Peaky Blinders are a notorious Birmingham gang involved in gambling, robbery, and violence. Far more violent than Knight's father had described, they did not hesitate to attack the police. They don't have the political ambitions of Tommy Shelby. You could say they are just a street gang focused on survival in Birmingham. They gamble, rob, and rely on violence to get through the day. In addition, the Peaky Blinders gang is also not a family like the Shelbys. They consist of various different gangs and are gathered in one association. Hence, the Peaky Blinders gang is not as successful and rich as it is told in the series, really. Its members are mostly young working men, with the youngest member being 13 years old. In serial terms, the name Peaky Blinders refers to razors tucked into their hats to injure their enemies or victims. In fact, at that time, razors were quite expensive and most likely, the Peaky Blinders gang couldn't afford a razor. According to historians, the name Peaky comes from their pointed hats and blinders is slang for their cool appearance. After dominating the streets of Birmingham for decades, the popularity of gangster Peaky Blinders in real life has started to slowly decline. His expansion into legal horse racing initiated a war between gangsters from Small Heath and the Birmingham Boys, the gang led by Billy Kimber. In fact, Billy Kimber was the biggest crime boss in the UK. With the insistence of Kimber, who has controlled the legal horse racing business from the start, the Peaky Blinders' power has weakened even more. Not only that, other elements such as education, discipline, and the police, which are more strict and harsh in punishment, have reduced the number of members of this criminal gang. They finally disappeared in the 1920s. The name Peaky Blinders eventually became a general term to describe the violence of street gangsters. Research shows by the 1920s, when the TV series is set, a group called the Birmingham Gang emerged, many of whom had come from the Brummagem Boys. They went on to become the most feared gang in the country. The Birmingham Gang was led by a fearsome gangster called Billy Kimber, a former Brummagem boy who went on to become the most powerful gangster in England. Kimber was a very intelligent man with a fighting ability, a magnetic personality, and a shrewdness of the importance of an alliance with London. In fact, to make the story more interesting and attractive, Stephen Knight has combined the speed, skill, and intelligence of Harry Fowles and the look and appearance, wealth, power, and ability of Billy Kimber, and of course the violence and cruelty of Thomas Gilbert to create a charismatic and attractive character like Tommy Shelby, and he succeeded. Thomas didn't shoot Kimber. According to information available in Gale's historical newspaper databases, there exists in Birmingham what are known as slogging gangs, who delight in waylaying unsuspecting people in lonely roads and brutally ill-treating them. And later in the piece, a young man named Eastwood was murderously assaulted by a number of members of a gang known as the Small Heath Peaky Blinders. The term slogging gangs isn't used in the TV show, but here seems to refer to the Peaky Blinders and probably their rival gangs as well. Although two gangs which feature heavily in the show, the Sabinis and Kimber's Boys, were real, they didn't have the same level of rivalry with the Peaky Blinders that we see depicted on screen. In fact, the relationship between the Peaky Blinders and Kimber's Boys, actually known as the Brummagem or Birmingham Boys, was completely different. In the TV show, the Peaky Blinders overthrow the Brummagem Boys and Thomas Shelby shoots Kimber. In reality, it was the Birmingham Boys who won this conflict and ended the Peaky Blinders' reign in 1910, 9 years before the show is even set. Anyway, even if the story is a kind of fiction, it is the truth that has been able to influence many audiences, and at the same time, there are many interesting facts about this series. For example, Sam Neill got Liam Neeson and Jason Nesbitt to help him with his accent. Also, Helen McCrory got some help from Ozzy Osbourne, English musician and songwriter. One avid Peaky Blinders fan has calculated on IMDb that Cillian Murphy must have smoked around 6,000 herbal cigarettes during his time on Peaky Blinders. Stephen Knight has confirmed in interviews that while Tommy Shelby would be smoking the standard cigarette, Murphy would be given herbal cigarettes without nicotine or tobacco to perform in the role. Similarly, in the same IMDb comment, it has been estimated that Cillian Murphy has drank 213 whiskeys during the series. Stephen Knight said in an interview that Jason Statham was supposed to play in the series, although he did not reveal in what role. Michael and John are brothers in real life. Finn Cole, who plays Polly's son Michael Gray, and Joe Cole, who plays John Shelby, are actually brothers in real life. The pair were born in London and have 3 other brothers also. Though the characters Alfie Solomons and May Carlton come from completely different backgrounds, actors Tom Hardy and Charlotte Riley are married outside of the series. Peaky Blinders is based on westerns. Stephen Knight explains that while America mythologizes working-class people and rebels in stories about cowboys taming the frontier, there aren't the same sort of revered stories in Britain, except those surrounding knights in armor, which too often factor in nobility and the landed gentry. So if Peaky Blinders appears to have a Western vibe, that's intentional. From the very opening scene when Knight decided Tommy Shelby should ride into town, just like every lone cowboy hero in a Western movie. He was desirous for Birmingham to have the same lawlessness as the Wild West, while at the same time capturing the sense of opportunity and the enterprising spirit of its inhabitants. Jack Rowan was a real boxer. Before he played the part of boxer Bonnie Gold in the series, actor Jack Rowan was an amateur boxer himself. He won 18 out of 27 bought in his teens. He never expected that he'd be using the same mouthguard he used in the real ring to play a 20th century boxer in a fictional one. Peaky Blinders was filmed at the Black Country Living Museum. As Series 1 of Peaky Blinders was funded by the regional screen agency Screen Yorkshire, the majority of the show was filmed in Yorkshire. However, other scenes were filmed in Birmingham, Bradford, Dudley, Leeds, Liverpool, and Port Sunlight. The Lancaster and Yorkshire Railway Trust provided the vintage train carriages along with the Ingro Museum of Rail Travel. Yet most notably, the Peaky Blinders producers filmed at the Black Country Living Museum. Huge queues formed across Digbeth at the Peaky Blinders casting. In January 2014, an open casting call was held for Season 2 of Peaky Blinders looking for young male actors between the ages of 13 to 19. They specified the need for a diverse cast and that no previous acting experience was required. This resulted in huge queues forming for more than half a mile across Digbeth. The doors opened at 11 a.m., but hopefuls began queuing from 7 a.m. Arthur and Ada have become popular children's names in the UK. According to the Office of National Statistics, parents have been naming their children after Peaky Blinders characters. In 2018, Arthur ranked in the top 10 list of boys' names for the first time since the 1920s and could have been due to the character Arthur Shelby. He may, however, not be the best role model. Ada broke into the top 100 list of girls' names for the first time in a century also and could be linked to Ada Thornley Shelby. Some British viewers have criticized Peaky Blinders for not accurately portraying the Birmingham accent. However, many members of the cast and crew have confirmed that their accents are historically accurate, claiming that the dialect in Birmingham during the 1920s was slightly different to what we know today. Benjamin Zephaniah plays Jeremiah Jesus, the local priest trusted by the Shelby family. Peaky Blinders is Zephaniah's first major acting role, and he is actually a poet from Birmingham. He was listed as one of the top 50 post-war writers in Britain by the Times newspaper in 2008. Cillian Murphy doesn't eat on screen. Despite the character of Tommy Shelby being present in many meal scenes, Cillian Murphy is never seen eating on screen. The only time we see him consume something other than alcohol and water is when he consumes black root. The Sabini gang was real too. Charles Sabini was a real Italian-English mob boss who was born in Clerkenwell in 1888 as Ottavio Hanley. Known professionally as the king of the racehorse gangs, Sabini dominated London's underworld for much of the early 20th century. He owned several nightclubs and had around 100 members in his gang, including Sicilian gunmen who were known for razor attacks. Sabini also had many connections in the police and political spheres. Final conclusion: who's real and who's not? The Shelby family, fictional. Cillian Murphy's Thomas Shelby tragically exists only in our dreams. Winston Churchill, this future British Prime Minister, was, in fact, a real guy. Billy Kimber, the leader of the Birmingham Boys, also known as the Brummagem Boys, was a real gang leader and possibly the biggest crime boss in England. In real life, he died of a prolonged illness rather than a shot from Thomas Shelby's gun. Darby Sabini, Noah Taylor's Italian kingpin, was a real English criminal who clashed with Kimber and his Birmingham Boys over control of racecourses for years. Alfie Solomons is based on a real-life gangster named Alfred Solomon. Like most Tom Hardy characters, the accent is purely of his own invention. No one but Tom Hardy would ever talk like that. Sir Oswald Mosley, the founder and leader of the British Union of Fascists, was a real political leader. During World War II, he was considered a threat to national security and interned for the duration of the war. In Peaky Blinders, he's played by Sam Claflin. Diana Mosley, Oswald's wife played by Amber Anderson, was also a real figure, a member of an aristocratic English family who shared her husband's proclivity for European fascists. Hitler referred to her as his angel and even attended the couple's wedding. She was also interned during the war. MI5 documents show that the government considered her an even greater threat than her husband.